The call came from a VA hospital administrator I'd never met. "Mr. Peterson? We have a veteran here asking for you. Says his name is Gabriel Torres, that you served together. He's in some distress and refuses to talk to anyone else. Can you come down? Gabriel Torres. Doc, my medic from Afghanistan. The man who'd saved my life and a dozen others during our deployment. The friend who'd stopped returning my calls 5 years ago, who'd gradually disappeared from everyone's life until I'd assumed he was either dead or too broken to maintain relationships. And now he was at the VA, in distress, asking for me specifically. I drove to the hospital with my mind racing through memories of Doc, the skilled medic who could start an IV in the back of a moving Humvee, the calm presence who'd talked wounded Marines through their pain while working to save them, the man who'd seemed unshakable during our deployment, who'd never flinched no matter how bad the casualties got. I found him in a waiting room off the main psych ward, sitting hunched over in a plastic chair with his face in his hands. He looked terrible, gaunt, unshaven, wearing the same unit t-shirt he'd probably been wearing for days. An old medical aid bag sat on the chair next to him, worn and patched, like he'd been carrying it everywhere for years. "Doc," I said quietly, approaching slowly. "It's Alex. I'm here." He looked up and I barely recognized him. His eyes were hollow, red-rimmed, with dark circles that suggested he hadn't slept in weeks. But there was also something else. Relief, desperation, like he'd been drowning and I was the first piece of driftwood in reach. "Alex, thank God, I didn't know if you'd come. Didn't know if you'd even remember me after I disappeared. Of course I remember you. You saved my life in Kandahar. Saved a lot of lives. How could I forget?" I sat down in the chair across from him. "What's going on, Doc? The administrator said you were in distress." "I'm losing my mind, Alex. That's what's going on. I've been losing it slowly for 11 years, and now I think I'm finally at the end, where it either breaks completely, or I tell someone the truth and maybe find a way to live with it." I felt a chill run down my spine. Truth about what? Doc laughed, a broken sound. "About everything. About what I saw in that village. About what I really did as a medic. About why I can't sleep, can't work, can't function, can't maintain relationships. About why I've spent 11 years trying to drink and drug myself into forgetting what I know." "What village, Doc?" "We cleared dozens of villages. Karabavag, March 2013. You remember it?" I did. Karabavag had been a routine clearance operation. Intelligence suggested Taliban presence, so our platoon had swept through, searched buildings, detained a few military-age males for questioning. Standard stuff. No contact, no casualties, no drama. It had been one of the easier missions of our deployment. "I remember. Quick in and out, right? No combat, minimal resistance." "That's what the after-action report says," Doc agreed. "That's what everyone remembers. Quick, clean, professional. But that's not what happened, Alex. That's not what I saw. And I've been carrying the real story for 11 years, and it's killing me." He stood abruptly, started pacing, his movements agitated and manic. "I need to tell you what really happened in Karabag. Need to tell someone before I lose my mind completely, or do something permanent to make it stop. And you're the only person from our unit who might understand, who might believe me, who might help me figure out if what I remember is real, or if I've gone insane. Doc, you're scaring me. Just tell me what happened. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it together." He stopped pacing and looked at me directly. "Promise me something first. Promise me that after I tell you, you won't just write me off as crazy, that you'll at least consider that what I'm telling you is the truth, even if it contradicts everything you remember about that day. I promise. Talk to me, Doc. Tell me what you saw." Doc sat back down, picked up his old medical aid bag, held it like a security blanket. Then he started talking. "Karabag, March 2013. We entered the village at dawn. Standard clearance. Knock on doors. Search buildings. Question residents. You were with the main element, clearing the southern section. I was with Lieutenant Morris, and 4 other guys clearing the northern section. I remember. We linked up at midday, compared notes, moved out. Whole thing took maybe 4 hours. That's what you experienced. That's what your section did." Doc's hands tightened on the medical bag. "But my section. We found something. In a compound on the edge of the village. Lieutenant Morris wanted to check it, because it was the only building that didn't have any people visible. No one came out when we knocked. Door was unlocked, so we went in." He paused, his breathing becoming faster. "The main house was empty, looked lived in but nobody home. We were about to leave when we heard sounds from below. There was a cellar, covered by a rug, easy to miss. Morris had us uncover it, open it up, clear it just to be thorough." "And what did you find?" "Bodies, Alex. We found bodies, 6 of them. Afghan civilians, 3 women, 2 men, 1 teenage girl, all dead. All showing signs of torture before death. And they were fresh. Killed within the previous day or 2. I felt my stomach drop. What? No, that wasn't in any report. There were no civilian casualties reported in Karabag. I know, because we never reported it. Doc was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Morris went down into that cellar, saw the bodies, came back up white as a sheet, called in the senior NCO, Sergeant Dawkins. They went down together, were down there for maybe 10 minutes. Then they came back up and gathered us all together. What did they say? They said those bodies were Taliban casualties, said the insurgents had obviously been using that cellar as a detention facility, had executed their prisoners before fleeing, said we'd document it but that it wasn't a significant find, just evidence that Taliban were in the area doing what they always did. Doc's voice dropped to barely a whisper. But I saw those bodies, Alex. I'm a medic. I'm trained to assess injuries, determine cause of death. And those people weren't executed by Taliban. They were killed by Americans. The world seemed to tilt. What are you saying? I'm saying those people were tortured and killed by U.S. forces. The injuries, the ligature marks, the bullet wounds, everything was consistent with American weapons and American tactics. One of the women had been shot with a 9mm pistol at close range. Standard U.S. sidearm. The others showed signs of interrogation techniques I recognized from our own training. That's impossible. No American unit would, wouldn't they? Doc cut me off. Think about it, Alex. We were in Taliban territory. Every village was potentially hostile. Every Afghan was potentially an insurgent or a sympathizer. And there were units operating in that area doing things we didn't know about. Black ops, intelligence gathering, interrogations that never made it into official records. You're talking about a war crime. You're saying American soldiers murdered civilians and left their bodies in a cellar. I'm not just saying it. I saw it. I examined those bodies. I know what killed them. And Morris and Dawkins knew it too. That's why they covered it up. That's why they told us it was Taliban work, and we needed to just document it and move on. I was struggling to process this. Why didn't you speak up? Why didn't you report what you saw? I tried. Doc's voice rose. I pulled Morris aside after we left the village. Told him I'd examined the bodies, that the injuries weren't consistent with Taliban methods. And he looked me right in the eye and said, Corporal Torres, are you questioning my assessment of the situation? Because that sounds like insubordination. So he threatened you. He said that if I pushed the issue, I'd be charged with interfering with an investigation, possibly with providing comfort to the enemy by suggesting American forces were responsible for civilian deaths. He said my medical assessment was noted, but that command had already determined the bodies were Taliban casualties, and my job was to accept that determination and move on. Doc was shaking now, his whole body trembling with the effort of telling this story, and the other guys who were there, they all just went along with it? They didn't see what I saw. They weren't trained to assess casualties like I was. When Morris said it was Taliban work, they believed him because why wouldn't they? We wanted to believe the Taliban were the monsters, not us. It was easier to accept the lie than to confront the possibility that Americans had tortured and killed civilians. What happened after you got back to base? I tried to talk to the chaplain. Told him I was struggling with something I'd seen, that I needed guidance. He said to pray about it, that God works through our military to bring justice, that I should trust my leadership. Doc laughed bitterly. I tried talking to the battalion surgeon. He said I was showing signs of combat stress, prescribed me sleeping pills, told me to take some time to decompress. So everyone you told just shut you down. Everyone except one person. There was an intel analyst, civilian contractor named Sarah Brennan. She'd been working with Afghan NGOs before taking the contractor job. She knew the local politics, knew the tribal dynamics. I told her what I'd seen, and she didn't dismiss it. What did she say? She said there'd been rumors, reports from locals about American forces conducting unauthorized interrogations, stories about detainees disappearing, bodies turning up in villages with signs of American weapons. Nothing confirmed, nothing investigated, just whispers that everyone ignored because we didn't want to believe our side was capable of that. Did she help you report it officially? She tried. She filed an inquiry with her chain of command, asked for an investigation into the Karabag findings. And 3 days later she was removed from her position and sent home. Contract terminated. No explanation given. Just gone. Doc's face crumpled. That's when I knew it wasn't just Morris and Dawkins covering up one incident. It was systemic. Someone higher up didn't want those bodies investigated, didn't want questions asked about what Americans might be doing in Afghan villages, so they shut down anyone who tried to look into it. What did you do? I finished my deployment, kept my mouth shut, came home and tried to forget about it. Tried to tell myself that maybe I'd been wrong, maybe my assessment of those bodies was mistaken. Maybe it really had been Taliban work and I was just a traumatized medic seeing conspiracies where there weren't any. But you couldn't make yourself believe that. No, because I know what I saw. I know what killed those people. And I know that somewhere there's a unit or a team or an individual who tortured and murdered 6 civilians and got away with it. Who probably did it to others too. Who are still out there, maybe still serving, definitely never held accountable. Doc pulled a worn notebook from his medical bag. For 11 years, I've been documenting everything I remember. Every detail about those bodies, about the cellar, about what Morris and Dawkins said. Every conversation I had trying to report it. Every person who shut me down or dismissed me or threatened me. He handed me the notebook. This is what's been destroying me, Alex. This knowledge, this certainty that Americans committed war crimes and I'm the only one who seems to care. Everyone else has moved on, accepted the official story, built their lives. But I can't. I see those bodies every night. I see that teenage girl with the ligature marks around her wrists and the gunshot wound in her chest. I see the evidence of torture, of suffering, of murder. I open the notebook, page after page of detailed notes, medical observations, timeline of events, names of everyone involved. It read like an obsessive documentation of trauma, the kind of thing someone creates when they're desperate to prove they're not crazy. Doc, this is a lot, and I don't know what to do with it. If what you're saying is true, this is massive. This is the kind of thing that ends careers and puts people in prison. If it's true, Doc echoed, you think I'm crazy? You think I imagined it, or exaggerated it, or misremembered it? I didn't say that, but you're thinking it. Because how could this be real? How could American soldiers do this and cover it up and no one ever face consequences? He laughed again. That broken sound. That's what I've been asking myself for 11 years. And the only answers I can come up with are either I'm insane, or the system is so broken that war crimes can happen and be covered up and everyone just moves on. What do you want from me? Why tell me this now? Because I can't carry it alone anymore. Because I'm on the edge, Alex. I'm either going to kill myself to make it stop, or I'm going to walk into a news station and start screaming about war crimes until someone listens or they lock me up. And before I do either of those things, I needed to tell someone who was there. Someone who knows I'm not a liar or a conspiracy theorist. Someone who might believe me. He looked at me with desperate eyes. Do you believe me? Do you think I'm telling the truth about what I saw? I wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to validate him, support him, be the friend he needed. But the implications were so massive, the accusations so serious, that I couldn't just accept it without question. I believe that you believe it, I said carefully. I believe you saw something that traumatized you, that you've been carrying this for 11 years, that you're in genuine psychological distress. But Doc, I need you to understand, what you're describing is huge. If this is true, we need evidence beyond your notebook. We need corroboration, documentation, something that proves American forces were responsible for those deaths. I know, and I don't have that. I have my medical assessment, my memory, and a notebook I've been writing in for 11 years. Morris and Dawkins would deny everything. The other Marines who were there probably don't even remember the details. Sarah Brennan, the contractor who tried to help me, I don't even know where she is now. What about Afghan sources? Local villagers who might have seen something? I looked, spent years trying to track down anyone from Kara Beg who might have information, but the village was mostly abandoned after we cleared it. Taliban retaliation for cooperating with Americans, or maybe just people fleeing the violence. I found one former resident through social media, tried to ask about the cellar and the bodies. He said he didn't know anything about it, that I should stop digging into the past. So you have nothing concrete? Nothing except my certainty. Nothing except the images burned into my brain. Nothing except the knowledge that 6 people were murdered and no one cares. We sat in silence for a while. I flipped through his notebook, reading his detailed observations, his timeline, his desperate attempts to make sense of what he'd seen. It read like the work of someone traumatized, yes, but also someone methodical, someone trying to document truth rather than create fantasy. All right, I said finally, let's assume for a moment that everything you're telling me is accurate, that those bodies were killed by Americans, that Morris and Dawkins covered it up, that there's a war crime that was never investigated. What do you want to happen now? I want justice. I want those people remembered as victims, not as Taliban casualties. I want whoever killed them held accountable. And I want to stop feeling like I'm losing my mind because I'm the only one who knows the truth. Justice might not be possible after 11 years. Evidence is gone, witnesses are scattered, the political will to investigate old war crimes is basically zero. I know, that's what makes this so unbearable. I know the truth, and I know there's probably nothing I can do about it. I'm carrying this forever, and it's going to kill me. I made a decision. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to check yourself into this hospital's psych ward. You need help, Doc. Professional help from people trained in trauma. This burden has broken you, and you need support to start healing. But the truth will still be there after you get help. but you can't pursue justice if you're dead or institutionalized from a breakdown. So first, we stabilize you, get you some intensive therapy, medication if needed, coping mechanisms that don't involve drinking or drugs. Doc looked like he wanted to argue but was too exhausted to fight. Second, I continued, I'm going to help you. I'll take your notebook, make copies, store it somewhere safe. I'll try to track down Sarah Brennan, the contractor who was removed. I'll see if I can find any of the other Marines who were there that day, see if any of them remember details that might corroborate your account. You believe me enough to help? I believe you saw something that traumatized you. Whether it was exactly what you think it was, or whether your memory has been shaped by trauma over 11 years, I don't know, but I believe you deserve help. You saved my life in Afghanistan. The least I can do is try to help you now. And if it turns out I'm crazy, if we investigate and find out those bodies really were Taliban casualties and I just convinced myself otherwise, then at least you'll know. At least you'll have an answer instead of this perpetual uncertainty. And either way, you'll have gotten treatment for the trauma that's been destroying you. Doc nodded slowly. Okay, I'll check in. I'll get help. But Alex, promise me you'll actually look into this. Promise you won't just dismiss it as the ravings of a traumatized medic. I promise, I'll treat it seriously. I'll investigate as much as I can, and whatever I find, I'll tell you honestly. I stayed with Doc while he checked into the psychiatric ward. Watched him hand over his medical bag to a nurse like he was surrendering a piece of his identity. Sat with him while an intake counselor asked the same questions about self-harm and suicidal ideation that I'd probably answered myself at various VA appointments over the years. Before I left, Doc grabbed my arm. Thank you for coming, for listening, for not just writing me off as crazy. That's more than anyone else has done in 11 years. You're not crazy, Doc. You're traumatized. There's a difference, and we're going to figure this out together. Over the next weeks, I dove into researching Karabaga. I filed Freedom of Information requests for after-action reports from March 2013. I contacted other members of our old unit asking if they remembered anything unusual about that clearance operation. I searched online for Sarah Brennan, the contractor who'd allegedly been removed for asking questions. What I found was complicated. The official after-action report confirmed Doc's basic timeline. Our platoon had cleared Karabagh, had found 6 bodies in a cellar, had documented them as Taliban casualties. Morris's signature was on the report. Dawkins had co-signed it. Everything looked proper and official, but there were anomalies. The medical assessment section was sparse, just a note that bodies were examined and determined to be victims of execution-style killings consistent with Taliban methods. No detail, no specific documentation of injuries, just a cursory statement that seemed designed to end questions rather than answer them. I found Sarah Brennan through LinkedIn. She'd left contracting work after Afghanistan and was now working for an NGO focused on documenting war crimes. I reached out, asked if she remembered an inquiry about Karabagh in 2013. Her response was cautious but revealing. I remember. Was told that certain operational details were classified and beyond my purview. When I persisted, my contract was terminated. I've always wondered what was in that cellar that was worth ending my career over. I contacted 2 of the Marines who'd been with Doc's section that day. One didn't remember the incident at all, said we'd cleared so many villages, they all blurred together. The other remembered the cellar and the bodies but insisted they were Taliban casualties. No doubt about it, he said. Those were insurgents who'd been killed by their own people. Happened all the time. I showed Doc's notebook to a forensic pathologist I knew from the VA, asked if the injuries described could distinguish between Taliban execution methods and American interrogation techniques. He said maybe, but without photos or physical evidence, it was impossible to say definitively. Torture leaves similar marks regardless of who's doing it. After a month of investigation, I had uncertainty. I had official reports that contradicted Doc's claims. I had one contractor who'd been shut down for asking questions. I had vague memories from other Marines. I had a forensic expert who said the evidence was inconclusive. I didn't have proof of a cover-up, but I also didn't have proof that Doc was wrong. I visited him in the psychiatric ward after 6 weeks of treatment. He looked better, more rested, less frantic, like intensive therapy and medication had at least stabilized him. Tell me what you found, he said immediately. I laid it all out. The official reports, Sarah Brennan's story, the Marines' conflicting memories, the forensic assessment, everything I'd discovered and everything I hadn't. So you don't have proof, Doc said flatly. You can't confirm what I saw. I can't confirm it, but I also can't disprove it. The evidence is consistent with either your version or the official version. It's possible American forces killed those people. It's also possible the Taliban did, and your trauma has shaped your memories to see American culpability. You think I'm crazy. I think you're traumatized. I think you saw something horrible, and your mind has been trying to make sense of it for 11 years, and maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle of the competing narratives. Doc was quiet for a long time. My therapist here says I might have moral injury. Says that's different from PTSD. Says it happens when you witness something that violates your core values, and your brain can't reconcile what you saw with who you thought you were or who the people around you were. That makes sense. She says it doesn't actually matter whether those people were killed by Americans or by Taliban. What matters is that I saw evidence of torture and murder, and my brain interpreted it as American responsibility, and I've been carrying guilt and horror over that interpretation ever since. She says the treatment is the same regardless of objective truth. I have to find a way to integrate the experience, accept what I saw, and learn to live with the uncertainty. Is that helping? A little? It's helping me sleep at least, helping me function day to day. But it's not giving me the justice I wanted. It's not holding anyone accountable. It's just teaching me to live with the possibility that a war crime happened and no one will ever face consequences. Maybe that's the best we can do, I said. Maybe in war sometimes terrible things happen and we never get clear answers about responsibility. Maybe the truth is lost in contradicting reports and faded memories and systems designed to protect institutions rather than expose wrongdoing. That's a depressing conclusion. It's a realistic one. You did everything you could. You documented what you saw. You tried to report it. You carried the memory when everyone else moved on. But you can't sacrifice your entire life to seeking justice that might not be achievable. Doc looked at his hands. So I just let it go? Accept that I'll never know for sure? Live with the uncertainty? Or you accept that you know what you saw, even if you can't prove it to anyone else? You honor the memory of those 6 people by refusing to forget them, but you also get to live your life, build relationships, find purpose beyond carrying this burden alone. The therapist says something similar. Says I can acknowledge what I experienced without letting it define my entire existence. Says I can be the medic who saw something terrible and the man who builds a life afterward. Both things can be true. Your therapist sounds smart. She is. Doc smiled slightly, the first real smile I'd seen from him since he'd called. Thank you, Alex, for taking this seriously, for investigating, for not just dismissing me as a crazy veteran. Even if we didn't find the proof I wanted, knowing that you believed me enough to try means everything. You're my brother, Doc. You saved my life. The least I could do was listen to what was destroying yours and try to help. Doc was released from the psychiatric ward after 3 months. He moved into a halfway house, started attending group therapy for veterans with moral injury, began rebuilding the connections he'd severed over the years. We met regularly, talked about Iraq, about Karabakh, about the uncertainty of truth in war zones. Talked about living with moral ambiguity and finding purpose despite unanswered questions. 6 months after his breakdown, Doc started volunteering at a refugee center, helping Afghan families who'd fled to America. If I couldn't save those 6 people in the cellar, he told me, at least I can help some of the people who survived. At least I can do something good with the skills I learned as a medic. I never found definitive proof of what happened in Karabakh. Morris and Dawkins both denied any cover-up when I finally tracked them down. The other Marines stuck to the official story. Sarah Brennan had her suspicions but no evidence. Maybe American forces killed those 6 people. Maybe the Taliban did. Maybe the truth is more complicated than either narrative allows. What I know for certain is that Doc saw something that broke him, that he carried an unbearable burden alone for 11 years. That our system failed him by shutting down his questions and offering no avenue for pursuing truth. And I know that sometimes in war, we don't get clear answers. We get competing narratives and institutional cover-ups and memories that fade or change. We get moral injury that lasts decades, carried by veterans who saw things that violated their core values and were never given space to process those violations. Doc is still haunted by Karabakh, still wonders about those bodies, still carries uncertainty about what he witnessed and what it means. But he's alive. He's functioning. He's helping others. Sometimes, that has to be enough. Sometimes, surviving the weight of unanswered questions is its own form of justice.